Properly executed, a good twist can elevate a film to the next level, but some movies just don't know when to stop piling it on. From sci-fi flicks to mystery movies, these are the plot twists that went too far. But be warned, major spoilers are ahead. Since Daniel Craig took over as James Bond with 2006's Casino Royale, 007 films have tended towards becoming darker, more personal, and less pulpy in each installment. At least this was the case until 2015's Spectre. The film features a long-awaited return of recurring villain, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, leader of the criminal organization Spectre. Near the end of the movie, Bond discovers that Blofeld is not only behind all of the evil plots that he's faced over the past 3 films, he's also responsible for every major personal misfortune that Bond has ever suffered. This is because, get ready for it, Blofeld is actually James Bond's long-lost and vindictive adoptive brother. We understand why this twist makes sense on paper. Conventional wisdom states that the more powerful the villain, the more interesting the conflict, and also that villains should have a personal relationship with the hero. The logical endpoint of this is to give James Bond an evil brother who single-handedly controls all the crime in the world. Unfortunately, this also means that the once large and indifferent world that Bond fought against has now been reduced to a family squabble. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what made the Craig-era Bond film so great. In the 2009 film Splice, cutting-edge geneticists Clive and Elsa are forbidden by their bosses from using human DNA in their experiments, so they decide to ignore the orders and continue their experiments in secret. In doing this, they create Dren, a near-human, multi-species hybrid. Clive and Elsa take it upon themselves to covertly raise Dren as their own daughter, and she starts maturing extremely fast, going through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood over the course of the film. The twist in Splice isn't one moment where everything suddenly goes wrong. It's more like a series of disturbing developments that culminate in a genuinely upsetting fiasco of a climax. For starters, when Dren is a newborn, Clive attempts to drown her, but it turns out that she has amphibious lungs. Elsa eventually reveals that she herself donated her own DNA to make up Dren's human half, not some anonymous donor. Once Dren reaches adulthood, she and Clive begin to have a physical relationship. Then, towards the end of the film, Dren spontaneously changes gender, becoming male, hyper-violent, and territorial. Finally, Dren kills Clive and assaults Elsa, who is forced to bludgeon Dren to death with a rock. And as if that wasn't enough, the film ends with a reveal that Elsa is pregnant with Dren's baby. At times, the script of Splice seems to exist merely to violate every possible taboo that the writer could think of, with no deep meaning or philosophy at its core. It certainly makes for a compelling film, but only because you're waiting to see what else could possibly happen. Released in 2009, Orphan tells the story of Kate and John Coleman, a couple who adopt a child named Esther from a local orphanage. At first, their new daughter seems sweet and innocent, but as time goes on, the Colemans begin to suspect that Esther might have a dark side. In its first 2 acts, Orphan is a fairly competent execution of the classic evil child horror story, and then it completely goes off the rails in Act 3. Throughout the film, Esther seems to have a surprising amount of knowledge of and interest in adult relationships, despite being ostensibly 9 years old. This culminates with her unsuccessfully attempting to seduce her father, which causes him and Kate to start digging into Esther's past. Kate learns the truth that Esther isn't really a child. She's a 33-year-old woman with a condition called hypoparathyroidism, which stunted her growth. She uses her childlike appearance to take advantage of people, and she's also a homicidal maniac. Many people found the plot of this film deeply offensive for multiple reasons. Some took issue with the way that it depicted hypoparathyroidism, a real-life condition that this movie grossly misrepresents. Adoption groups also denounced the film for similarly obvious reasons. The backlash was so strong that the home video release of the film even felt the need to include a pro-adoption message as a way to counteract the toxic narrative of the movie. Released in 2019, Serenity tells the story of Baker Dill, a boat captain who lives on a remote Plymouth island. He spends his days trying to hunt down and catch an elusive giant fish named Justice. Out of the blue, Dill's ex-wife Karen shows up and presents him with an offer. She tells Dill that her current husband Frank is abusing their son, the quiet and introverted Patrick. Frank is planning on visiting Plymouth Island soon, so Karen offers Dill $10 million in cash if he takes Frank out on a fishing trip and ensures that he never returns. So far, so good, but here comes the twist.
Plymouth Island is a game.
That's right, Plymouth Island and all of its inhabitants don't really exist. This world is actually a realistic video game that was created by and is being played by our true protagonist, Patrick. His real father died a decade earlier. Baker Dill is a fictionalized version of Patrick's dad that he's using to enact a cathartic fantasy of killing his stepfather. And then when Dill finally does decide to knock off Frank within the game, Patrick similarly works up the courage to kill Frank in the real world. While Serenity starts to fall apart after the twist, it's always fun to watch Matthew McConaughey play an offbeat character, even one who has a hard time expressing his emotions. The Force Awakens was a promising start to a new trilogy, ending with an array of tantalizing unanswered questions. Perhaps the most intriguing of all concern the enigmatic Rey. Despite being a poor orphan from a remote planet with no Jedi training, she has inexplicably strong Force powers. Could Rey perhaps be the long-lost child of some great Jedi? The next Star Wars film, The Last Jedi, pulled the rug out from under audiences by answering the question of who Rey's parents were in the most shocking way of all, by saying they were nobodies who sold their daughter into slavery. Then The Rise of Skywalker was released. In this film, Rey learns that she is, in fact, the long-lost granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, a reveal that most found equal parts confusing and unnecessary. Some fans think that this new twist was added just to appease those who disliked the reveal in The Last Jedi, but it was so poorly executed and nonsensical that it seemed more like a cleanup job than a genuine plot point.
What a dreadful situation.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them opens with a montage of news headlines, telling us that the evil wizard Gellert Grindelwald is still at large and could be anywhere. The segment is brief but important info for the upcoming twist. Then the film proper begins. Our hero, Newt Scamander, is a magizoologist who's just arrived in New York in 1926 with a suitcase full of rare magical creatures. Scamander soon runs afoul of Percival Graves, a high-ranking official in the magical government of the United States. Graves asserts that one of Scamander's creatures is responsible for the death of a local politician, but in truth, Graves is attempting to frame Scamander to cover up his own crimes. Once Graves is exposed and defeated, Scamander discovers that Graves has magically disguised his appearance. After dispelling his magic, Scamander reveals that Percival Graves is actually, in a shockingly underwhelming twist, Gellert Grindelwald.
What are the odds of that?
To be fair, Grindelwald is an important figure in larger Harry Potter lore, but up until now within this particular story, he did not matter at all. Sure, we technically got a bit of a tease about Grindelwald at the very beginning, but he was barely mentioned throughout the rest of the film. When he finally appeared, many viewers had totally forgotten about him. While some die-hard Harry Potter fans thought this was a cool reveal, others thought it was a bit confusing, or even worse, laughable. When a dangerous patient named Rachel Solando mysteriously vanishes from a maximum security mental hospital, US Marshal Edward Teddy Daniels arrives on Shutter Island to solve the case. As he digs deeper, Teddy begins to suspect that Andrew Ladis, the man who is responsible for his wife's death, is also somewhere on the island, and he vows to find him as well. After a series of surreal visions and frightening encounters, Teddy makes a horrifying discovery. In truth, he is Andrew Ladis, a patient at this facility. He killed his own wife, and this entire investigation was an elaborate roleplay therapy staged by his doctors to give him a chance to confront his demons. The big kicker? Edward Daniels is an anagram for Andrew Ladis, and Rachel Solando is an anagram for his wife's name, Dolores Channel. When Shutter Island hit theaters, it received a lukewarm response from critics and audiences. The plot device of a man investigating a homicide only to discover that he is the killer has been done much better in other movies. Shutter Island is still a decent film, so it's hard to get too worked up over this one. But did we really need another movie where it was all in his head?
Excuse me.
In the 2018 film Upgrade, Gray Trace and his wife are attacked by mysterious assailants. Gray ends up paralyzed and his wife is killed. Shortly after, tech mogul Aaron Keane offers Gray a chance to walk again by installing a prototype AI chip named STEM into his spine. He accepts, and after the procedure, Gray finds out that not only can he walk again, he can also temporarily gain superhuman reflexes by giving control of his body to STEM. Gray then uses these abilities to get revenge on the people who attacked him through a series of thrilling and brutal action sequences. In the end, Gray discovers that his friend Keane hired the goons that attacked him, but it wasn't Keane's idea, it was STEM's. After Keane invented STEM, the AI forced him to participate in a plan to give itself a human body, which ended up being Gray's. So how does our hero win the day? Well, unfortunately, he doesn't. There's a moment where we think he's won. Gray appears in a hospital bed, alongside his still-living wife, but this is, in fact, just a fantasy world that Gray is trapped in. STEM has now taken full control of Gray's body permanently. Between the rich benefactor is evil, the AI is evil, and the happy ending is actually a dream, Upgrade has three fairly tired sci-fi cliches woven into its plot. Taken together, they end this almost great movie on a gratuitously bleak note.
I'm not proud of that.
With a little more restraint, Now You See Me could have easily been a fun and glamorous crime romp a la Ocean's 11 or Catch Me If You Can. The film was a globe-trotting cat-and-mouse chase between FBI investigator Dylan Rhodes and a group of Robin Hood-esque criminal magicians called the Four Horsemen. That premise alone could be more than enough for a cool heist film, but this movie just doesn't know when to quit. Layered on top of that, Rhodes discovers that the Horsemen have ties to an ancient order of wizards called the Eye, with real magical powers. But that's not all. The final twist is that although Rhodes has been attempting to catch the Horsemen, he's secretly their leader and a member of the Eye. Presumably, Rhodes' entire multi-decade FBI career was a long con so that he could serve as the group's inside man for a single heist. This idea is so inconceivably elaborate that it completely shatters the reality of the film, even more than the actual magic does. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.